But first, now at 4, IMPD is investigating 2 homicides that left 2 men dead overnight.
2 rappers, the same east side of Indianapolis, 7 weeks apart, both shot dead, both cases unsolved. No arrests, no suspects named publicly, no motive confirmed in either case. That is not a coincidence. That is a crisis. And the city of Indianapolis, a city that recorded 241 murders in a single year just 5 years ago, a city where the East District alone accounts for 38% of all homicides, is sitting with both of those open wounds right now, waiting for someone to tell them something they don't already know. Tonight we go deep into both of those cases, but at the center of everything is one man, a man who built a legacy out of nothing, beat the federal government twice, survived 1 bullet, and was still on the verge of the biggest deal of his career when somebody came back with a rifle. This is the story of Eric Butler, the man Indianapolis called Lil E. Before we go any further, if you found this channel and this is your first time here, this is what we do at Psychology of Crime. We don't just run through a timeline and call it case. We go into the mind, the environment, the behavioral patterns that build up over years before everything explodes, the systems that fail the people inside them, the human cost that gets buried under headlines. If that kind of storytelling matters to you, and I think it does because you're here, hit subscribe right now, like this video. Turn the bell on, because the people in these stories deserve more than 2 paragraphs on a news site. They deserve someone willing to ask the hard questions. But to understand what happened to Eric Butler, you have to understand the world that shaped him. And that world has a name, the Grundy Crew. Richard Bernard Grundy III was, by the federal government's own account, Indianapolis's most dangerous drug kingpin. The operation he ran flooded the east side with methamphetamine, heroin, cocaine, and marijuana. The supply lines ran from Indianapolis all the way to Phoenix, Arizona, specifically through 2 suppliers named Gilberto Viscara Milan and Mario Eduardo Villasenor, who provided meth and weed. Money went west. Product came east. Operatives like Andre Mosby literally transported cash from Indianapolis to Phoenix and drove back with drugs. Stash houses on the east side held the supply. Members used coded language on their phones. Guns protected the product at every level. The federal investigation revealed this organization distributed over 400 pounds of methamphetamine alone, plus massive quantities of other drugs, between 2016 and 2017. It was implicated in at least 10 violent deaths. Eric Butler, Lil E, was a high-ranking member of that crew. In 2015, he was charged alongside 10 others in a sweeping case tied to a series of violent crimes and murders connected to the Grundy organization. A case that should have put him away for a very long time. And then the case collapsed. A witness lied about her own identity. Evidence problems emerged. The charges against Butler were dropped. He later pleaded guilty to a drug charge in 2018, did his time, and walked. But here's what nobody says out loud when they talk about these federal prosecutions. When an organization that size, one built on multi-state supply lines, violence, coded communication, and millions of dollars in product, when that organization gets dismantled, the infrastructure doesn't just disappear. The relationships don't disappear. The debts don't disappear. The territorial expectations don't disappear. They redistribute. The people who survived the collapse carry the weight of everything that existed inside it. Money owed, product unaccounted for, loyalty tests that never got resolved. And this is where the community theory becomes psychologically interesting, even if it can't be confirmed. People close to this case have circulated a figure, a number attached to a debt, $750,000, allegedly owed, to people with connections to the kind of supply pipelines that ran through Phoenix. I want to be crystal clear. That figure has not been confirmed by law enforcement, has not appeared in any court filing, and has not been published by any credible news outlet. It is community speculation. But here is what is confirmed. In June 2025, exactly 1 year before Eric Butler's death, federal authorities indicted 21 individuals in a brand new Indianapolis to Phoenix drug trafficking organization. A different leader, a new generation, the same corridor, the same geography. 19 agencies executed warrants at 21 locations across Indianapolis and Phoenix simultaneously. They seized 75 pounds of methamphetamine, 8 kilograms of cocaine, 2 pounds of fentanyl, 56 firearms, and more. The Indianapolis to Arizona drug pipeline that Richard Grundy ran didn't end with Grundy. Someone else was running it, and the people who survived the original collapse were still living inside that ecosystem. Eric Butler beat his 2025 cocaine trial in February of that year, was acquitted on every charge: dealing cocaine, dealing a narcotic, unlawful possession of a firearm by a serious violent felon. He walked out of that courtroom not guilty, and within 16 months, he was dead. Now let's talk about what the behavioral science tells us here, because this is where psychology of crime earns its name. There's a concept researchers call acquired fearlessness. It was first developed in the context of suicide research, the idea that repeated exposure to painful or threatening experiences gradually desensitizes a person to fear, and that over time, actions that would terrify most people begin to feel survivable. The mechanism applies to street violence in a very specific way. When someone has been shot at, when someone has been arrested, prosecuted, and beaten serious charges multiple times, when someone has been in and out of county jail 15 times. Each one of those events recalibrates the internal threat meter. What registered as extreme danger starts registering as routine, as manageable, as something you survived before and can survive again. And here's the tragic irony baked into that psychology. The very experiences that build fearlessness are the same experiences that signal to your enemies that you are still in the game. Every acquittal is a victory, but it's also a public statement that you're still here. Every walk out of a courtroom is a declaration. Every time you survive a shooting and return to the same streets, you are communicating something to the people who shot at you. Reverend Charles Harrison of the Indianapolis 10-Point Coalition put it bluntly after Butler's death. If you're going to stay out there in the streets and be involved in criminal activity, one of two things is going to happen. Either you're going to end up back in prison, or you're going to be the victim of violent crime. He added, from the courts, they've got to hold them accountable, because if they don't, they're going to stay in the streets, and they're either going to do something to someone or someone's going to do something to them. That's a community leader speaking. And in its bluntness, there's something worth examining. Because the question it raises is not just whether the courts fail to hold Butler accountable. It's whether the courts, or anyone, offered him a viable alternative, a realistic pathway out. Because from everything we can see in the public record, Butler wasn't just choosing the streets. He was building something else at the same time. Music, deals, legacy. He was trying to exist in two worlds simultaneously. And that duality, that split-lane existence, is one of the most psychologically consistent patterns we see in cases like this. The street world and the music world aren't always separate. They overlap, they sustain each other, and sometimes they collide. Lil E with record deals on the table and new music in the works, both silenced before they got there. The Indianapolis music community put it plainly: this doesn't feel like a coincidence. It feels like a crisis. And the data backs that up. Indianapolis in 2021 recorded 271 homicides, the highest in the city's modern history. By 2025, through focused violence intervention, community programs, and data-driven policing, that number had dropped to approximately 133. Real progress. Genuine, hard-won reduction. The East District still accounts for 38% of all homicides in the city. The chance of becoming a victim of violent crime in Indianapolis is roughly 1 in 115, compared to 1 in 320 across the rest of Indiana. So the progress is real. And the crisis in that specific corridor, the East Side, is also real. Those two facts coexist. And the people who live there, who make music there, who raise children there, carry both of them at the same time. The ATF officially entered the Lil E investigation on July 2nd, announcing a $5,000 reward for information leading to the arrest of those responsible. The Bureau confirmed it is providing all available resources to IMPD. Detective Christina Friel at the IMPD Homicide Office is listed as the lead investigator. The April 23rd shooting remains a separate open case. As of today, no suspect has been named in either incident. No arrest has been made. The two shootings have not been officially linked. But I want to come back to those numbers one more time, Because geography is psychology when it comes to targeted violence. 0.3 miles. That is how far apart those two shootings were. On a straight road. On the east side of Indianapolis. The same man. 57 days. A rifle the second time. Somebody knew exactly where Eric Butler was. And they were patient enough to come back. So here's what I want to leave you with. And I want you to really sit with this. Eric Butler beat a massive gang conspiracy case in 2015 when the system's own evidence fell apart. He beat a federal quality cocaine dealing case in February 2025 when a jury acquitted him on every count. He survived a shooting in April. He was building music, chasing deals, making something, while simultaneously, by all accounts, still connected to a street ecosystem built on debt, loyalty, and violence that outlasted the organization that created it. Here's a question that haunts this case psychologically. At what point does resilience become a liability? When you have beaten the system so many times that you believe, maybe unconsciously, that you will beat whatever comes next, when survival starts to feel like invincibility. And here's a harder question underneath that. What would it have taken for Eric Butler to actually exit that world? Not theoretically, practically, with a criminal record that extensive, after charges like those, with the community and relationships and identity he'd built. What door was actually open? What path existed that wasn't the one he was already on? Because the courts let him go. The music was coming together. The deals were almost there. And somebody with a rifle decided it didn't matter. That's the cycle. And it doesn't end with an arrest. It doesn't end with a $5,000 reward. It ends when the systems that are supposed to offer alternatives actually deliver them. If you have any information about the death of Eric Butler, the ATF tip line is 1-888-ATF-TIPS. You can also email ATF tips at atf.gov. You can contact Crime Stoppers of Central Indiana anonymously at 317-262-8477. These cases are still open. These families are still waiting. Now I want to hear from you. What do you think happened to Lil E? Do you believe the April shooting and the June murder were connected? And if so, what do you think drove it? Is there something the official investigation is missing? And what do you make of the psychological pattern here? The acquittals, the resilience, the return to the same streets. Drop your theory in the comments. I read every single one. If this episode meant something to you, subscribe to Psychology of Crime right now. We don't cover crime to entertain. We cover it to understand. Because understanding is the only thing that ever actually changes anything. New episodes every week. Stay with us.